we're back to this like will they won't they on the ceasefire. Just today, the UN Security Council, including finally the United States, successfully passed a resolution, a ceasefire resolution between Israel and Hamas, which does include prisoner exchanges, but doesn't include Israel. So that's a problem because Israel is like, no. Because
Yeah.
they always are like, no. Hamas has said, yes, they've agreed to the deal. But of course, Israel has not. And then the US says, somehow it's still Hamas's fault. Now, I don't know what kind of like reverse, I don't know what's happening here. I think they've lost like the gaslighting thread. Like Blinken and Biden don't really know what's going on, but they still keep on saying, like, well, the ball's in Hamas's court. And even like mainstream news is like, nah, they said yes. Like, what are you guys talking about? The other thing that happened in Israel is that their moderate, so-called moderate Benny Gantz, he resigned from the governing coalition because he said Netanyahu doesn't have a plan for this war to end. It doesn't mean that much unless he gets 5 other members of the Knesset to also leave this governing coalition, and then they could call for new elections. So that's neither here nor there. But meanwhile, Olay, the real thing I wanted to focus on is this what is being billed as a rescue operation, right? A hostage rescue, which was in fact the murder of 274 Palestinians, including 64 children, in order to extract these hostages. And yes, the United States did help it unfold and help them with their mission, the IDF. So what am I talking about? What happened? So this was in central Gaza in a refugee camp called Al Nuseirat. I'm going to pronounce that wrong, but it's okay. Nuseirat. Around 10 a.m. So tons of people. 10 a.m. on Saturday in broad daylight, 2 teams of Israeli special forces, some disguised as Palestinians, crossed into Gaza. It's thought they were traveling in at least one truck and in civilian cars. The streets of the densely populated Nuseirat refugee camp were busy with people shopping at a market. The targets were 2 residential buildings, apartments a few hundred meters away. Palestinian witnesses described some troops arriving in 2 undercover vehicles, one which resembled the trucks used by Israel to bring commercial goods into Gaza. The other was a white Mercedes truck piled high with furniture and other belongings, a common sight in the camp that is home to thousands of displaced families. So what happened is they rescued 4 people. 3 of them were in a car as they were trying to leave. This is special forces trying to leave when they came under fire. And they couldn't get out. So they ordered basically missiles to rain down from the sky. So the Israeli military decided to send in support, attacking from the air, from the sea, and the ground with massive force. This is according to the BBC. Mobile phone video from the scene shows people diving for cover as missiles whistled in and gunfire rang out. Later footage showed bodies strewn in the streets. It was in these moments so many Palestinians are likely to have, correction BBC, not died, been killed. This is from The Intercept. Abu Nasser, one of the witnesses, said, "We heard people crying for help in the bombed homes. They had martyrs and injuries, but we couldn't help them. The scene was gruesome. The streets was filled with civilian body parts," he said. "Many injuries, bleeding out without ambulances being able to reach them. The sustained attack on Nuseirat lasted about 75 minutes, which is absolutely terrifying." And again, this is not we sent in more special forces in another truck. This was no. We just called in like the drones and the copters and the missiles came raining down. Like miraculously, and there's unverified reports that maybe a hostage was killed in the rescue, but I haven't seen actually a verification of that. But it's a miracle they didn't kill the 4 precious lives that they wanted to save in this whole thing. The last piece of this is that Israeli forces with 3 hostages battled away from the market and eventually reached the beach, not far from the temporary pier built by the U.S. Navy to deliver humanitarian aid, and a second helicopter was waiting. The rescue captives scrambled inside, and the wounded officer was loaded. He would later die of his injuries. So they didn't actually kill a hostage, but an IDF officer did die in all of this, along with, again, the peoples whose lives we don't count as equal, Palestinians. Yeah. But that last piece, I think, is kind of each part of this story, Ole, it's like worse and worse and worse. Again, everything in out of Gaza is like some sort of evil Mad Libs, you can't imagine how bad it gets. So they likely are special forces are pretending to be Palestinians and pretending to arrive in aid trucks, or at least trucks that have commercial goods, some sort of goods for the camp. Then when they escape, they likely are using that pier that was designed for that aid, for food, for water, for medicine to come in. But instead, no, they're using it as an escape route, a safe spot for them after they just mass murdered a bunch of children. So I think anyone reporting on this and not calling it a massacre is being completely disingenuous and irresponsible. But I cannot get over the Israelis outdoing themselves, the IDF outdoing themselves when it comes to the kinds of atrocities they are able to commit over there.
Honestly, I don't even feel like I have any like new words to add. Like at this point, it feels like, just squeezing water out of a rock. Like I'm not like as out. It is deplorable, and I don't know another way. Like I feel like I've said all the things, and everybody said all the things. Like it is a genocide, it's unspeakable, this shouldn't be happening, and yet it is happening, and it's been happening, right? Like there's an extra highlight, like an extra spotlight on what Israel is doing now since October 7th, and has obviously been ramped up. But like the general dehumanization of Palestinian people that makes way for what we're seeing now has been going on. The US's like commitment to Israel still going on, like it's always been. And so I don't know what new. I just don't have anything new to say. Like I literally just am just like, fuck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the new part is like this is what they see as a victory. Like the IDF sees it as a victory. Biden administration put out a statement that did not mention the 274 and plus 700 wounded lives that were, snuffed out here. They're just like, yay, okay, the hostages are back. We welcome them back.
That's the US. It makes me think of Cat Williams had a joke back in the day. Like when one of his stand-ups, he had a joke like, he's like, if you hear the way that the US talks about war, they'd be like, today we killed this many insurgents, and you're like, I don't know no insurgents. Meanwhile, they're actually talking about civilians and people. Like there's always been what the US government, like that's what the US does, is what these world powers do, that's what these countries do, right? Is like they decide who doesn't matter, and the media gets on board with them, people get on board with them, and that's how they're fed to. So it's like it doesn't shock me, right? It's just like a larger scale of when police kill people here, and it's there was an officer involved shooting or blah blah blah. Like they always find this language to dehumanize and disregard the lives, because what they're telling you aloud is they don't care about all the Palestinian lives that are being lost, right? What they're saying is the lives that are valuable are the lives of the Israeli people, or the hostage, or those hostages, but they don't care about it. Both sides, they don't care. Like they don't care. And there's a lot of dehumanization, like with the lives of civilians in general, right? Like it's a lot of people talking past each other and dehumanizing one at the expense of the other, right? It's really some sick shit. I really don't. I don't know what else to say, Fran. I wish I had something like intelligent to offer.
Right. I mean, I think that, in wars past on Gaza, it's always, there are, Israel suffers some casualties, like 2 or 4, in the like less than 10. And then about 2 to 3,000 Palestinians are killed, largely civilians are killed because of that. And we're just seeing that play out, on, hyperspeed. It is playing out for us so quickly. And I think the real thing is that the United States is shedding the illusion. It's like, yeah, I mean, to make it into a situation around cops and like losing that illusion, if anyone still had that, it's like the United States has lost the illusion of being an actual, like, any arbiter, any reliable arbiter when it comes to international law, when it comes to maybe any kind of mediation. I mean, this is the reason why, like, the US is always about, oh, China's influence and the Russia's influence and all these motherfuckers. Yeah, because they actually have more credibility because they haven't burned it for decades and decades and decades. So if you want to get like, if you want to make these other powers, regional powers, less of a force, then actually be more honest. Like, don't throw down with Israel in the way that you do. It's the main reason why they've lost credibility. The United States has lost credibility around the world. That and, Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan and everything else, right? But it's like, all of that is mask off now. So we shall see. But I think it's so disgusting to celebrate the return of 4 hostages. And TBD on what they have to say, because these are also people who were living in the refugee camp. They saw who was around. They saw the women. They saw the children. They saw the bustling of Palestinian life there, probably for the first time in their lives.
Yeah.
So, and they were also the ones who were like keeping them safe, right? In
Yeah.
some ways, as awful as that is. We also heard this week that like one of the hostages who was released back in November when there was a ceasefire has been bullied because she spoke well of her captors and said that, yeah, they gave me food and it was okay. And we talked about the conflict. We like, whatever we would argue with one another. And
Yeah.
people are like, oh, they've been trolling her, telling her that it's a shame that she was released. It's a shame she's not still being held. So, if it doesn't fit their, a genocidal narrative, they don't want any of it. So
Yeah.
TBD on this. But I feel you in terms of like, what else is there to say? What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.